Dr. Anthony Fauci, AIDS, SARS, Ebola, Zika, and the coronavirus.
Today, Dr. Anthony S. Fauci is best known because of his position in the coronavirus task force and for his many media appearances.
Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for taking the time.
Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
It is a failure. Let's admit it. Things will get worse before they get better.
When asked about the recent threats he's received, Fauci simply said, it's my job. This is the life I've chosen, and I'm doing it.
And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Remember, all I'm offering is the truth.
And on the cool check-in, center stage on the mic.
How y'all feel out there?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Brothers and sisters.
Do you know what time it is?
What time is it?
It means to know. It's a form of intelligence. To be hip is to be update and relevant.
Introducing
Get down.
the world famous.
I said it hit the news.
Let's go. Now, so just let me introduce
Vessel.
Now.
Hidden in plain sight.
And mind your business.
Watch out.
New world order.
I'm not gonna take this anymore.
You know what I'm saying?
So what you saying?
check this out.
Here we go.
A lot of good science and observing the responses of individuals who are infected, as well as the responses of individuals who have been in vaccine trials that have not been overwhelmingly successful, but that have given us clues, tell us some very important things. That even though the overwhelming majority of infected individuals do not make an adequate immune response, the fact is if you carefully probe, and we do this with new molecular techniques, cloning techniques that give us a real insight into the individual B cells that make antibody, we find that in fact individuals are capable of making what we call broadly neutralizing antibodies. They don't make them right away. Only about 20% of the people make them, and they usually take up to 2 years or longer to make them. By the time you make them, even though they're broadly protective, it's too late for the individual who made them. So what we need to figure out is how do you harness the immune system to stimulate that B cell repertoire that will make the broadly neutralizing antibodies.
It gives a somewhat candid look into the mindset and the mentality that Dr. Fauci had early on in the pandemic. BuzzFeed News and the Washington Post both published stories this week that detailed hundreds, if not thousands of pages of documents that they obtained that were essentially just the contents of Dr. Anthony Fauci's emails from the early days of the pandemic. Both news outlets obtained the information through what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. The Freedom of Information Act basically subjects federal agencies to hand over their public records. These reporters likely sent these requests many months ago and are just now receiving the responses. He had thousands of emails that were just coming in from people throughout various points in his life, whether it was former colleagues, various medical professionals. You could see Fauci sort of taking time to respond or at least acknowledge that he received so many questions and queries. And he seemed very interested, first and foremost, on providing sound and scientific guidance. For example, the drug hydroxychloroquine that President Donald Trump had sort of touted as a potential cure. And publicly, Fauci had sort of said this is an interesting potential treatment, but we need more data. And that was the exact same thing that he was saying in email.
Dr. Timothy Sloan, senior pastor here at the Luke Church in Humble, Texas. I had the great privilege of speaking to our nation's top doctor, infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for taking the time out to share with us on today. I'm grateful today that we're going to get a chance to hear from you and deal with some of the issues and the questions that so many people have in the African American community. We're looking at it through a historical lens, and so many are remembering what happened at Tuskegee. We're challenged with some of the racial disparities. So our question is, why should we trust this vaccine?
First of all, I think we need to acknowledge that the concern and the hesitation based on what you refer to as, the slights and the mistreatment of the African American community historically by the established government medical establishment is real in history. And we have to recognize that it occurred, and we have to emphasize that situations have been put in place, safeguards have been put in place that this could never happen again. With that as a background, it's important to explain to our African American brothers and sisters that, in fact, if you look at what went into the development of this vaccine, what are the questions that people ask that are the cause of the concern and the hesitation, and address each of these in a clear way that people can understand. So the first question that people ask is, this was really fast. It was the fastest in history to go from the discovery of a new virus to actually getting vaccine into people's arms in less than a year, something that normally would have taken multiple years. And safety was not compromised, nor was scientific integrity. It was just literally a reflection of great scientific advances that have allowed us to do this so quickly. In addition, an enormous investment of money on the part of the government to essentially start making the vaccine before you even proved that it worked. So you take a financial risk, but not a personal safety risk. That's the first thing. The second thing that's probably even more important is that we're saying that this vaccine is safe and that it's highly efficacious. How did you come to that conclusion? Was this the federal government trying to pull something over on us? Or was this the pharmaceutical company trying to make a lot of money at our expense? And you answer each of those questions, because the determination of whether the vaccine was safe and effective was made by a clinical trial involving tens of thousands of people, 30,000 in the Moderna trial and 44,000 people in the Pfizer trial. But the examination of the data, and this is really interesting that people need to understand, the examination was made by a completely independent body who was not beholden to the federal government and was not beholden to the company. It was an independent body of statisticians, clinical trialists, immunologists, ethicists, a group that looked at the data, and they determined that it was safe and effective. And only then did they show it to the company, which then put it before the FDA, and the career scientists, not the politicians, but the career scientists at the FDA looked at the data, confirmed that it was safe and effective, and then presented it to their own independent advisory committee. Again, a committee beholden to the American public, not beholden to the government. That group then decided that it was the proper thing to make this vaccine available to the general public. So what people need to understand, that the entire process was transparent and independent.
You've had the distinct honor and pleasure of having some of your emails, many of your emails, released to the public over the last few days. And there have been questions or controversy, some ginned up, but some questions raised about some of them. And I want to get you on the record addressing some of them. There was an email sent to you from an executive at EcoHealth Alliance, and this is one of the companies that funded some of the research at the Wuhan lab. And this email thanked you for basically saying you believed that the origins of the coronavirus were natural. This email said, quote, I wanted to say a personal thank you on behalf of our staff and collaborators for publicly standing up and stating that the scientific evidence supports a natural origin for COVID-19 from bat to human spillover, not a lab release from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That email was April 18th. Now, there are some of your critics who say this shows you have too cozy of a relationship with the people behind the Wuhan lab research. What do you say to that?
Oh, that's nonsense. I don't even see how they get that from that email. That email was sent to me from them. I have always said, and will say today to you, John, that I still believe the most likely origin is from an animal species to a human, but I keep an absolutely open mind that if there may be other origins of that, there may be another reason. It could have been a lab leak. I believe if you look historically, what happens in the animal-human interface, that in fact the more likelihood is that you're dealing with a jump of species. Well, it makes a difference because, as some of you may know, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, on December 21st, a person was arrested who was on their way from Sacramento to Washington, D.C., at a speed stop in Iowa. And the police asked him where he was going, and he was going to Washington, D.C. to kill Dr. Fauci. And they found in his car an AR-15 and multiple magazines of ammunition because he thinks that maybe I'm killing people. So I ask myself, why would Senator want to do this? So go to Rand Paul website and you see Fire Dr. Fauci with a little box that says, contribute here. You can do $5, $10, $20, $100. So you are making a catastrophic epidemic for your political gain.
Yeah, man. I don't understand how. Well, it's I guess a sticky situation, emotional situation, but I didn't see the point of having that confrontation when it appeared kind of sort of that Fauci was being bullied. He was taking a verbal assault session. And Senator Paul couldn't necessarily control himself and actually let Fauci answer a question. And even when Fauci took his 2 minutes, 3 minutes to present his case, he still didn't really answer a question. He just basically made it seem like Senator Paul was out to put money in his pockets. So it's like a kangaroo court.
Yeah, they hopping around,
right? Nothing really gets done in that situation.
But the one thing for sure, what it shows is that it's just like you just mentioned, and probably in layman's terms for most people who missed the double speak and the understanding of the politics. It's like a 3-reason circuit. It's like you said, you got all these different acts going around. They point a finger here, there, and doing this, doing that. And it's really, nothing is really getting accomplished, getting done. Senator Paul, his accusations is that, he mentioned that Fauci did several different things, even killed these people with this agenda of pushing the booster. And Fauci, he himself even said that Senator Paul didn't have any evidence. That would have been, if he would have had the statistics or the numbers to pop him in the head with, then it would have been a different story. But it's just like you said, it's just like you slinging mud and nothing is getting accomplished. What I was going to do or suggest, just for the people that's out there, again, below, I will post the Fauci dossier. And if we have enough time, we can probably go into just a little bit of that and then a small review or pick out some interesting points in the real Dr. Anthony Fauci book that was written by Kennedy Jr. So, but let's continue and push and see what's next with this next video.
They broke into St. Patrick's Cathedral during the middle of a mass and grabbed the chalice from the priest. I mean, they did things to gain attention. Everybody thought that was horrible. But when I was looking at it and I was starting to read about the kinds of things that they were asking for, if you put aside the histrionics and the theatrics, they were making perfect sense. And we were the ones that were not getting it. My attention was gotten by several things. There was one figure who was sort of like the grandfather or the father of the activist movement named Larry Kramer, who was a very well-known Academy Award-nominated screenwriter, a playwright, an author. And he wrote an article in the San Francisco Examiner, I think, a Sunday magazine section, which was just phenomenal. I still have a picture of it. It says, I call you murderer, an open letter to an incompetent idiot, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
This is something that I thought was very interesting. And this is taken from the real Anthony Fauci, the book that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And here's a little inserts for those. And I want to get your take because I know that you also have heard the book. So here's a little.
The first step is to give up the illusion that the primary purpose of modern medical research is to improve Americans' health most effectively and efficiently. In our opinion, the primary purpose of commercially funded clinical research is to maximize financial return on investment, not health. John Abramson, medical doctor, Harvard Medical School. I wrote this book to help Americans and citizens across the globe understand the historical underpinnings of the bewildering cataclysm that began in 2020. In that single annus horribilis, liberal democracy effectively collapsed worldwide. The very governmental health regulators, social media eminences, and media companies that idealistic populations relied upon as champions of freedom, health, democracy, civil rights, and evidence-based public policy seemed to collectively pivot in a lockstep assault against free speech and personal freedoms. Suddenly, those trusted institutions seemed to be acting in concert to generate fear, promote obedience, discourage critical thinking, and herd 7 billion people to march to a single tune, culminating in mass public health experiments with a novel, shoddily tested, and improperly licensed technology so risky that manufacturers refused to produce it unless every government on earth shielded them from liability. Across Western nations, shell-shocked citizens experienced all the well-worn tactics of rising totalitarianism: mass propaganda and censorship, the orchestrated promotion of terror, the manipulation of science, the suppression of debate, the vilification of dissent, and use of force to prevent protest. Conscientious objectors who resisted these unwanted, experimental, zero-liability medical interventions faced orchestrated gaslighting, marginalization, and scapegoating. American lives and livelihoods were shattered by a bewildering array of draconian diktats imposed without legislative approval or judicial review, risk assessment, or scientific citation. So-called emergency orders closed our businesses, schools, and churches, made unprecedented intrusions into privacy, and disrupted our most treasured social and family relationships. Citizens the world over were ordered to stay in their homes. Standing in the center of all the mayhem, with his confident hand on the helm, was one dominating figure: As the trusted public face of the United States government response to COVID, Dr. Anthony Fauci set this perilous course and sold the American public on a new destination for our democracy. This book is a product of my own struggle to understand how the idealistic institutions our country built to safeguard both public health and democracy suddenly turned against our citizens and our values with such violence. I am a lifelong Democrat whose family has had 80 years of deep engagement with America's public health bureaucracy and long friendships with key federal regulators, including Anthony Fauci, Francis Collins, and Robert Gallo. Members of my family wrote many of the statutes under which these men govern, nurtured the growth of equitable and effective public health policies, and defended that regulatory bulwark against ferocious attacks funded by industry and often executed by Republican-controlled congressional committees intent on defunding and defanging these agencies to make them more industry-friendly. I built alliances with these individuals and their agencies during my years of environmental and public health advocacy. I watched them, often with admiration. But I also watched how the industry, supposedly being regulated, used its indentured servants on Capitol Hill to systematically hollow out those agencies beginning in 1980, disabling their regulatory functions and transforming them finally into sock puppets for the very industry Congress charged them with regulating.
And that's just a little tidbit of the book of The Real Dr. Anthony Fauci. Vessel 2, you have read the book. Can you give us a little bit of your insight and the pros and cons, or what you found interesting?
Yeah, I listened to the audible version of the book. Yeah, it's a lot in that book. You know, a lot of it. I thought once the book had came out, would cause more alarms to go off than what actually had went off. There's a lot of accusations in the book that still need to be answered for. And I believe that the title of Teflon seems to be a common title in people of high position power places. And I think Fauci has had his hand in a pot of mischief for a long time. And as we've covered in these clips, his record as far as being able to produce medicines that actually help people is in question. And inside the book also, and even in the clips, he mentioned that they were doing testing in Thailand, which is covered in the book. They mentioned that, and also Africa as well.
Right.
And it's interesting to even think of how he can say openly that, you know, those type of tests even take place. And who's to say what countries are those experiments should be taking place at? I mean, what is the determination for that? That book just opened up a lot of questions for me, basically. What say you, Professor Warren?
Well, from what I gathered of that book, yes, I totally concur. There's a lot of things that's questionable, and like you said as well, the clips that we have shown or played on Hips News dealing with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Again, we're not pointing fingers, or we're not. This is not a judge and jury. We only bringing to light things that we believe, as well as for the common people that normally don't have a voice. These questions are valid, and believe that they want to have answers to them. Yeah, there's so much. I mean, we have little time, but there's so much still that needs to be taken care of. Say, for instance, like again, going back from the HIV scenario to all the way up to this modern day pandemic. Um, uh, even Dr. Fauci himself said it's not really effective. You know, after taking, you know, taking a booster or so, you know, the efficiency seems to dwindle away after several months. And then he's promoting for them to take more, and not only that, he also has uh, came out and stated, and even did promotion and went around the country to have the children take this these doses, and we still not yet have any idea of how it would affect the people of the world, or whomever taking it. There's been several questions, like you mentioned, Vessel 2. How would it affect people who's on heart medicine or high blood pressure medicine, or who's struggling with the remission of cancer, or does it affect the elderly more than it does the youth? Or there's so many questions, and so little answers, and it's really it's a scary thing, you know. And again, it's not that we're here to point fingers, but you have to wonder, you know, what's been going on. Is it done in the right mind? Is it maliciously done, diabolical? You know, all these questions are coming up. But I hope that within the next 6 months to a year, everything will come out and will be cleared, and we can find the answers that's been hidden plain sight. Um, thank you, hipsters out there in I podcast land, and stay tuned for further episodes. This is Vessel 1 and Vessel 2 signing out, and like always of this special edition, Vessel 2, can you give us your final thoughts?
Thank you, Vessel 1. Another episode where we're just giving you information. Please take it how you can get it. If it means something to you, then that's good. We've done our job. If it doesn't mean anything to you, then that's okay. It's not for everybody. All we're trying to do is get people to think for yourself, stand on your square, protect the ones who you consider to be loved ones, stay virus free. Peace.
Peace.